There we go. Hi, everybody. It's Amy Fountain here, and today is September 15th, 2015. And we are here today to get together again for the Autism Book Club, and we're going to be going over chapters 10 and 11. And I want to introduce my special guest from the Gifts of Autism, Lori Shayu. Say hi, Lori.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to have you here, and I'm really grateful that you stepped up and out and wanted to join us. And it really ended up working out well because it turned out that Connie wasn't feeling very well. And so she was unable to make it today. And so I'm really glad that I had someone to exchange with, as well as someone who was willing to join us on the broadcast. Again, that invitation does sit open for any of you who feel courageous enough to come out and share yourselves. And Lori, I'd love for you to maybe even share a little bit about your own personal experience on how it's not easy for us to pop on here and just start talking, even if we make it look that way sometimes. But in the moment, it's worth it because you get into the flow, and we're really held very special by Lyrica and Gail, who hold space for us, who we are holding space for them and their book and the wisdom that came through them. So yes, Connie sends her love to everybody, and she will be back with us on the next broadcast, which will be in a couple weeks on September 29th, same time, same place. So yeah, Lori, let's touch on that really quick because I really want to reiterate the value of what's going on in our world right now and at this time period. There's been a lot of predictions about there being this leap in human consciousness and that sort of thing towards the end of this month, actually. And I know I have been discombobulated. There was a point last month or early this month where I could not get numbers straight. I just felt like there was a major recalibration going on within myself and lots of changes. And I did my best to be really nice to myself and not really judge any situation and allow it to be. And it flowed much more easily and gracefully than maybe things like that have in the past. But I think that it's very important right now to recognize that the more that we open up and become vulnerable, you know, kind of naked, in not having those filters or those walls up, you know, the things that reiterate and reinforce separateness. You know, we have this not just a thing in society, but it has a piece to do with our separation from source. When we fell in consciousness and forgot who we were and did it willingly to come play this human game, we chose the game of forgetfulness and separateness. And in that separateness, we felt like it was really interesting because I think that the byproduct has been us wanting to fit in. So this sense of trying to fit in, but not recognizing our authenticity or our uniqueness, which is really our individuality. You know, we are little sparks of source that exploded and went out into experience. And every bit of that made us individual, but yet we are all still part of the one. So I think that that's a place that we're really embarking upon in a more tangible way, is who we truly are. And in that, we're starting to recognize that we're not separate from each other. We're actually indeed connected. And the fears that keep us from stepping forward and out and speaking our voice and whatever our truth is, we tend to hold ourselves back. It's not other people that hold us back. We hold ourselves back. So can you talk a little bit about that and maybe your process or anything you want to share on that subject, Lori?
Well, first I have to speak my truth because this screen says off air for me. So I'm not sure if I'm being seen or not. So I think that's kind of interesting from the get-go. Is it supposed to say on air, or it actually says off air for me, even though I see you and I can hear you? I
Well,
don't know. I'm just.
it says live on my screen, so I'm going to trust that, and we will see what happens. We'll just go with it, okay? Because I think that you're on with me.
Okay, I had to speak my truth, because I'm like, okay, why doesn't it say live?
Okay, no, that's great. And you know what? Anybody, I forgot to mention this. I did turn on the Q&A, so anybody that's actually watching us live, comment on that. Let us know if you see Lori, and go ahead and flow out what you were going to say, and hopefully we'll get back. And if not, then we'll just keep going.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe there's probably a reason why I'm not being seen if I'm not. So you were saying just how you've been forgetting numbers and all of that, and the last few months for me has been just not sleeping. You know, I've been sleeping about 3 or 4 hours, and trying not to judge it, but like, because of our conditioning, it's like, oh, we should be sleeping 7 hours or 8 hours. It's like trying not to get too caught up in what is happening, what is. So on that level, I just wanted to share what's going on with me, because I've let go of the expectation. It's not bothering me as much anymore, and it seems that I'm actually sleeping through the night because I've let go. So that's part of it. The other part of your question, which is how hard it is to show up and be and share ourselves completely, is absolutely true for me. And it's you know, part of it is, I mean, it's not even just about the gifts of autism and sharing like a different type of you know, perspective, but it's really like a constant, because we're so conditioned to socially conditioned to fitting in, most of us, that, you know, we don't even realize that we're not even showing up for ourselves. So it's a constant remembering of like, I'm here with this message, and why do I have such a passion to share what I do? Is I can't forget that I'm here to share that. So I have to have the courage to stand and be seen and heard. So yeah, it's definitely something that I always have to have courage to do, but definitely worth it. When I do it, I always feel liberated for doing it. So, and just my own just acknowledgement to the nonverbal autistics that come here so compromised in the body, and the way that they show up, and they really do show up in their truth. I just want to acknowledge them for doing that, and I really do look up to them for being such a great role model.
That's perfect. Let me ask you really quick, what, when you are having these, you know, perceived lack of sleep, how do you feel when you have those? How are you actually feeling? Do you feel revived? Do you feel like you've slept enough?
That's a great question. The funny thing is, I did actually feel like like during the day, I wasn't really tired. Every once in a while I would be tired, but it wasn't every day. So that's a good awareness. At the beginning, it was like, oh my God, 3:33, 3:40, 4:20, like what is going on? What's wrong with me? The whole like story comes up. But honestly, like I felt fine. So it's just like the story in my head would just take over.
Yeah, I absolutely can relate to that. And that's a perfect example of societal conditioning, or just our human condition in feeling like, you know, we have to live a certain way. And really great on how you touched on what we're going to talk about a little further, about how you admire those with autism and how they come into this world compromised the way that they do, and not looking like the norm, and not acting as the norm, and not doing anything to fit in. It's a testament for each of us to recognize that so much of what they do, say, and be are things that we can take into consideration. And I know that there was a point in my life where, just like any of us, you would look at somebody with autism, for example, and say, what? They're the future of humanity. They're an ascended human being, or, you know, like they're the evolution of humanity. It's kind of like, how does that work? But the more that I delve and dive into this this book especially, and just stepping into that energy and tapping into that collective autism mind, it just makes sense without it having to make sense on what we already know. And that's something to take into consideration, because we all have this rational mind. Some people call it maybe the ego. It's that part of us that argues because it only knows what it knows. And so we can honor it and we can give it credit and acknowledge it, but we don't have to agree with it. We can just say, okay, yes, that is all true and was true. And now what do I choose? It doesn't have to be this truth in the moment. And so I love that you said, you know, it takes consistent courage to share, because it really does. And I would say that those of us that have experienced lives with children, especially those of us who are very close to, we have an offspring that isn't considered normal. And this goes for any label. I mean, whether you've had your child diagnosed with something or not, you have experienced the challenges of a new child. Children that come with this frequency, this vibrational frequency that is completely different, this way of being that is calling us forward to step out of the conformity, to get back to nature, to get back to what is natural, to be so different that it can be embarrassing for us at times. You know, I'm getting emotional as a parent, because it's like, you're emotionally set off when your child is having a tantrum or screaming in public. Sometimes, you know, I've definitely had experiences where it wasn't triggering me, but it's one of those things that it's very real, and it's something you almost like, you want it to just end and go away. But the reality is if we can step forward, and you've seen those forums and those experiences where somebody has just openly, vulnerably shared what happened to them. And then the outpouring of support and resonance that happens from the other people that are within that group is amazing. So I just want to keep, you know, asking those of you, especially those of you who are within this book club and within the Autism Experience group, that is a sacred space that we've created, that this book helped us create. It was created in a sense originally around this book. You know, what has been your experience with reading this book? And let's just share what this experience of awe in autism is. And so that is a very safe place that you guys can come in and share with each other. And you're only going to get an outpouring of love and understanding. And that's all I've seen. We're pretty good at moderating, but I also see that there isn't really a need for a whole lot of that. For whatever reason, you know, we're kind of, it's a protected space. It's kept sacred. So I invite you to share in that group your stories. If it's not something that you're ready to come on air and do with us, that's totally fine. I understand. But it's something that's really important. And I know that Daniel mentioned that to Connie very early on in this process when we were getting ready to do the book club, is the importance of the stories that were going to come out of the folds, that we're going to just help change. And it just brings more information, more awareness and things to the surface. And it doesn't matter what they are, you know, let's just not judge them as good or bad or positive or negative, because they all add to the piece of this evolution that we're experiencing. And Lyrica really touches on that. I'll get into chapter 10. We'll start here, where she touches on, she says here in the beginning of it, the signature of autism, satisfaction, is its serving role. You have energy grids of light to seek both heaven and earth. Your tube of light within has the language of light to see the joining of heaven and earth fused together. That really resonated with me hugely when she talked about the tube of light, because over the time period that I've done work with Susie Miller, we did some stuff prior to autism, Awesomism, that was called the New Human Experience Project. And her student, child, teacher, because he was teaching her, wanted them, him and maybe it was the collective, wanted her to do the work that she was doing with the children with adults. And so that's what the New Human Experience Project was, because they the children have said, we are the new human. And so this was more getting us to do the energy work from an adult point of view. And we did the tube of light. And for many years, that's even how I've utilized centering myself and getting myself aligned so that I can connect telepathically. So it's really interesting that Lyrica mentions it here at this point. And it is essentially, we are that connection. We are those tubes. Lori, have you seen some of that more recent coverage on those rays, those tubes of light that are shooting through the sky? They've been captured on video as well as on camera. Have you seen any of those? She's on mute.
Yeah. I have not seen that, and actually, I love that you're bringing it to our attention right now, because yeah, like just reading these 2 chapters, it was like what I really took home was, or took away was, how connected they are really to, as you were just saying, heaven and earth, more to the heaven side. You know, and we're helping them descend. But I feel like they're ushering us into the golden age is really what I got through it. You know, like you said, the new human. You know, and we're all going in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's just so many pieces and parts of this, you know, and my personal kind of interest and passion has a lot to do with energy and just playing with that and utilizing it and actually helping children to recognize it within themselves. And I really tread lightly on saying teaching it, because it's really just a reminder. I think that they know it's there. I actually, in fact, got to do a little class yesterday that I haven't gotten to do in a really long time. And it was just joyful to see how engaged the kids were with the energy thing. And so now, anyway, besides that, you're seeing orbs, you're seeing all kinds of things in photographs. I mean, it's all over Facebook, at least I see it, where there is just energy captured in digital photography now. And it's amazing. And I've actually seen orbs and energy captured on camera in video, which to me is a little bit newer of a thing. And I love it every time because it's dynamic, it's moving. It's really incredible. But then Lyrica starts to get into that. She starts to get into another piece of this, and it's kind of in regards to what I was saying about connecting back to nature, coming back to what's natural, because on a very physical level, what I have found in my experiences and studies with autism particularly is that part of the reason that they have a challenge embodying is because the toxicity of the environment. And that could be the toxicity of the physical body. So it could be very physical. It could be an emotional toxicity, you know, an energetic toxicity. It just kind of depends. Something that I'm just going to say is a dissonance. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but if you think about all of our practices that we've done, conventional farming and all of those sort of things have really led us down a road to not being what's natural. And part of what she touches on here, she talks about the elementals. She says, elementals are the life force in all of God's divine creations. And then she goes on later to say, elementals are the new energy source in this world a new energy source this world is wanting. When human behavior drove them underground, their alternative power source was shut down. They have waited for minds like those in autism to get free from holds that bind them. Other light workers may see the same call. Elementals hold the same source light that lives in autism. And she talks about Maitreya telling me this form of source light in the earth has a way to lift us up. We have no dear lasting life here without the elementals. They reveal to us how the world is formed. They are not to be misused. And I couldn't agree with her more, because I've always been fascinated, even as a child, with, let's just say, fairies. And that's just, you know, one facet of the elemental kingdom, let's call them. And we know the elementals as, you know, fire, water, earth, air. Did I miss one? But all of these bits and pieces. It's energy, you know, it's a consciousness. They all have their roles, just like we have our roles. And I think that and the reason I think she touches on the light worker aspect of it is because light workers recognize the energy. You know, they recognize that there's this whole unseen existence that essentially creates physical experience. So I really love what she touches on there with that. Is there anything you want to share in regards to that? If there was anything that meant anything to you or triggered something in you?
The only thing that comes to me as you were saying things just flow in is just that we are sometimes attracted to a certain element or elemental. So for me, it's always fire. It could be that I'm an Aries, but so I do resonate with, I guess, that energy of fire. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
No, that's great. I mean, any little bit, you know, that's the thing that I was talking with the kids yesterday, actually, is nothing is incorrect as far as what your experience is. And that's something that we need to cultivate and honor, is our personal experience. You know, I had the kids do an exercise where they closed their eyes and they were visualizing. And someone saw this like red zigzaggy, and somebody else saw sparkles, you know, and somebody else didn't see anything, you know, but maybe they felt something. We went through a feeling exercise, and one of the moms actually felt and saw the color while she was feeling it. So she kind of felt the color. And so I love that. I thought that was amazing, because the more we can do these practices and exercises and just play with the ideas, the concepts, and the pretending, the imagination that goes on within us, the more that we are cultivating that garden of inner senses that we kind of have ignored over time. So whatever it is valid. So Lori, you were experiencing, you know, in this moment, your resonance and complicated. It doesn't have to go any further than that. It can just be what it is for now. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then the other thing I had highlighted, she just talks, we've lost our way to love the earth. We dearly need a safe hold to tether us here. We cannot find that in human life experiences for the most part. What do you get anything from that? What she's saying there?
That was my big question, actually, because it's
Awesome.
it is such a deep concept that it's like, well, how do we achieve that? I don't know. Maybe you can open it up, and then I'll let you know what flows through me.
Say that again. There was a little bit of a...
Yeah. As I read that last night, it was like, wow, that's so deep that I really have to sit with that. But I was just curious what you know, how you interpret that first.
Sure. Well, I definitely agree we've lost our way to love the earth. I think that humankind has absolutely forgotten that we are of the earth. You know, our bodies, our physical bodies, are created through these elementals. The elementals are there to reflect to us our creations. They're there to reflect love, the energy of love, which is what creates and holds every atom and molecule together. And as far as her saying, you know, we dearly need a safe hold to tether us here, and we cannot find that in human life experiences for the most part. I mean, think about how far we have fallen from just nature in general, let alone the understanding that our physical bodies are of the earth. You know, I mean, some people that are religious might sort of have that concept floating around a little bit in there, but it's really limited because, you know, doctrinate in, I don't know how to call it, you know, but particular types of doctrine and recorded things have been edited, let's just say. And I'm probably being bold stepping out and saying that, but it's absolutely true, because it's not that things that, for example, in the Bible or the Quran or whatever are not correct and true what they say, but they're edited. So there are things that were kind of left out by maybe forces that be, that didn't want us to know particular things. I actually been very into disclosure these days, and just recently heard that there was a whole section in the Bible that was left out about reincarnation. And I was really fascinated by that because I grew up in, in a Christian religion that reincarnation didn't exist. And think about the repercussions of that. If reincarnation exists, let's just say, for someone who doesn't believe it does, if it exists, then it really means something. And we just have this one life and we die and hopefully go to heaven if we do the right things and behave properly, right? Then you live your life differently.
For sure.
You really do. So the thought to say, okay, I'm living my life a certain way, and if I die at any point, I'm going to start right back at this energetic point. A lot of people would make a totally different choice. There's a woman that I love listening to the stuff she has to share, and she told this story about a friend of hers who had created her reality to have mental illness and all these problems. And she calls her up one day and she says, I'm calling to say goodbye because I'm going to kill myself. And the person, the woman listening says, oh, okay. Well, it was nice to know you. Now, she was being she wasn't entangled in this woman's manifestations. And she said, it was nice knowing you. Bye, I'll see you later. But before you kill yourself, let me remind you that everything that you've created your life to be up until this point, you're going to come back and start all over with that as a baby. Baby food, diapers, the family, all that kind of stuff. So just take that into consideration before you go kill yourself. And the woman didn't kill herself. Let's just say she actually ended up completely changing her life and making a different decision. So I thought that was fascinating. So as far as the whole like reincarnation thing and recognizing that, I mean, if you look at it, we can't find human life experience for the most part on how to love the earth. I mean, so much of our beliefs and societal have to conform to be the same, and to not recognize how powerful we are as creator beings. But I think that's where we are at this point, this turning point, whether you call it a leap in consciousness, whenever that happens. It's happening every day, slowly at least. And that's why I say, come out and speak, because I find that if I talk with people, not all the time, of course, there's beautiful experiences in silence, so we have to have balance, but to really share with each other the depth of what's going on with us helps us to reveal more of what's emerging. So something really interesting came. Go ahead, Lori. Yeah, absolutely, please.
Yeah. It's bringing forward something for me when you're talking about reincarnation. So I think about this woman named Anita Morjani, who had a near-death experience. She was about to die of cancer, just all of this fear and everything. Well, the long story short is that when she made it to the other side, and now she had that strong connection with Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he ended up connecting her to the whole Hay House and getting her story out. Her biggest message, because she knows that reincarnation exists and she knows what's on the other side, that I believe that the nonverbal autistics, and many people do too, obviously not just the nonverbal autistics, but her biggest message is be the best you that you can be. And is really saying the same thing of like, don't try to fit in. It's like, you come here with your own uniqueness, our own uniqueness, and we should really honor that, and we should live by that. And there's more joy when we know that, that like death doesn't mean like we're all over and kaput. It's like, it's actually more fun if we realize, well, it's just a chapter. But anyway, that's what came forward was like, be the best you that you can be. And I think that says it all right there. Be you. Beautiful.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's absolutely what autism is telling us, is to be our authentic selves. That's why they, you brought something up before, how you were talking about, you mentioned your friend Nicole, and how she was saying they are strong resistors. Share a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I'll just give you a little, in case people don't know who Nicole is. She's now 14 years old. She's a nonverbal autistic, and she only maybe a year and a half ago just started communicating through the iPad. So it stunned her whole family, as they believed that she was a certain way, and then all of a sudden she starts typing things that are beyond their own comprehension, about God, about sacred geometry, about just about everything. And whenever you actually bring up anything that's not important, she'll actually redirect you and say, you know what, let's talk about God, which I love. It's like, yeah, let's not talk about anything that's wasting any time. I mean, like, they remind us of what's important in life. And even like when we get a little sidetracked with the colors of like the energy, like she won't waste time with that. She'll just, again, like, center us back into really, what's important in life. So going back to the resistor, she used to attend a different school, which was a non-public school for special needs. Sammy's here to say hi. My cat. And every now and then she would have, acting out. She would act out. Okay, this is not going to work. You come over here. He's got to make his debut.
Of course.
All right, cool.
Hi, Sammy.
So, hey, you can't, that's natural, right? You can't force
you got to
anything.
acknowledge the being that's joining us.
I know, and there's got to be a reason why he's showing up right now, and he needs a little water. So I'm offering him water right now. So basically, yeah, Nicole would act out because, teachers would actually, or her aide would try to force her into doing things that either A, she couldn't do, she couldn't do physically, or B, that wasn't really important, and it was against her whole being, which I think is so important, because many neurotypicals, if you want to call it that, typical folks will fall into the whole conditioning thing, and they'll just do it because we've been conditioned to do it, where they're hardwired not to do things so that it looks like they're acting out, but really they're just saying, no, I'm not going to dishonor myself. And I think it talked about that in one of the chapters, where it's like when the autism spark, or the autism mind is tampered with, it actually takes away from the energy. So they're really being on point when they're acting up, but they're really honoring themselves, is what I really get. And just honored to know Nicole before and after, before she had the communication, and now that we see her as a complete teacher and a guide, and someone who understands a lot of things that we don't understand. So we're getting a lot of wisdom through her, and I am.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, it's almost like, as I read this book, I can see, especially in this chapter, because Lyrica talks about time to honor souls and autism as planetary healers. That's on page 114. And absolutely, I mean, when the writing of this book happened, she talks about this in this chapter, and I'll go on to share a little bit more of what she said. But in regards to them really stepping forward as healers, them stepping into their roles, and that's exactly what you're alluding to. Is it's kind of like we've reached a point as a collective, time to forward and be who we came here to be. And it doesn't have to be grandiose, profound, incredible thing that, like a movie star, and I think that that's part of that. conditioning. A lot of us as kids sometimes felt like, oh, I want to be rich and famous. You know, who doesn't want to be that? Because that's who's highlighted, that's who's put up on a pedestal, kind of thing. But I think that's also a part of us inside that, if you think about it, if you have a moment of awakening, you start to have that proverbial question, what is my purpose? You know, why am I here? Those seem to be the beginning questions we start to ask when we, and I think children ask those questions very early on, and those questions get answered for us. You know, oh, well, who do you want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up? And that question used to make me so mad. You know, I remember watching my preschool niece, it was several years ago, and all these little kids were wanting to be doctors and dentists, and one girl wanted to be a mermaid. I loved that. Someone else wanted to sell ice cream, you know? I mean, and I was like, can one child just say, I want to be happy? You know, like,
Right.
why does it have to be this hat, this money-making role? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. We're just conditioned to focus on those things and make that be who it is that we are. But why can't who we are just be joy, love, light, you know, just here to enjoy an experience? And in that, I think that we do find purpose. And I love that they are resistors, because I agree with you. I was definitely one of those that resisted silently. And perhaps that was just the sign of the times. There wasn't a lot of acceptance or allowance for us to feel bold enough and be able to be vulnerable and open up and say, you know, this is who I am, and I don't really care what you're going to say or do. And there's definitely been some, what do they call those? The weird ones. I think that Steve Jobs has a little video about that, right? Just the people that actually step out and just say, I'm going to be who I am, regardless of what you say. And I love that they are strong resistors in autism, because that is another showing and telling that I'm not here to be, and nor can I be, like you said about the energy, because they feel it. What's that?
Yeah, there's so much we can learn from them. I think of one of the kids I know, Harry, who is like 14 now. When he's in pure joy, he does not resist that joy at all, you know. And I feel like, you know, we've been conditioned so much where like, you're weird if you show your full out joy. But the honest truth is, and most people will agree, and I've had some surveys out on the gifts of autism about like, what do you learn, like what have you learned through your autistic child, is basically like that they light people up when they're being their true selves, and that we're not like trying to repress their joy, or even when they're tantruming, that, you know, they're fully expressing. They're actually, in my opinion, they're more healthier because they are expressing themselves. I think in our generation we were really trained to be quiet. We were kind of the silent ones. And whether we did it inside or not, now I'm finally coming out and saying enough is enough, because look, the work that we're here to do is really to shine light on, you know, the autistics, but really they're just reflecting to us of the new human, and where we're forging forward. We're going into being our true selves. And when we're not, we're repressing that part of us, and we're not being true to ourselves. So I don't know, I just really always down to them authentically who they are. And like what I love, and I've seen it so many times in 25 years, is the way that they'll look at themselves in the mirror. They really adore their face. And I feel like they could even see God within their eyes. I mean, because I didn't have the judgment of like, that's wrong. I would actually enjoy watching them enjoy themselves. And then I would be like, man, I want some of that. I got to work on that. But yeah, I mean, like they're definitely, you know, they're definitely wired differently and more healthy in many ways.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I experienced that as a child. I remember actually having a moment not long ago where I remembered this experience. And it was like every bit of that self-love and adoration that we all need to forge forward in this coming out and being and expressing who we are, which is totally what you're saying. You know, they're expressing fully who they are, and we're taught to suppress that. You know, don't feel. Feeling is like the feeling our emotions is one of the biggest things that I have found has suppressed humanity as a whole, because the reality is our emotions create our reality. Our thoughts and our emotions create our reality, and our emotions are the power behind that creation. They are what the key to the manifestation. And so there's no wonder that us human beings who have this tremendous range of emotions have no intelligence about how to use it. We just stuff it down, we suppress it, we're not allowed to feel it. And if we do, like you said, even at an extreme amount, it's shamed, you know? And so then we're stuck in our bodies with all of this energy that's meant to move and flow through. Emotions only last probably, I've heard neuroscientifically, like 90 seconds. So it's the thought that fuels the emotion that makes it last longer. And I've done these exercises with my kids where even my 2-year-old, who does it better than my 8-year-old, you know, where you just feel it. How do you feel? How do you feel? And you're acknowledging it, and you're not judging it. You're just allowing it to be what it is. And then from that state, you proclaim your independence upon it. I am not my emotions. I have, I forget the words, but, you know, I have a choice in how I want to react to these emotions. And after you say a couple of those clearing statements, then you just decide, where do you want to be? Well, I want to be in a state of peace. I just want to be neutral, because neutral is where you have the ability to discern. You know, when you're in an emotional fit, no wonder it makes people feel uncomfortable, because we're connected. So they feel it. We feel it. We feel each other, what other people are feeling. And we don't know what to do with that. When someone is crying in front of us or throwing a tantrum, it's uncomfortable. You know, we don't want to burst out crying, or what does that make us look like? You know, there's all of those judgments and those things that come rushing in for us. And those needs to feel like, I think that there's a part of us that naturally is trying to break through that. Like, I want to know how to control that. I want to know how to be in control of myself in the midst of that. Right. And
yeah.
so they're such a beautiful example to say, wow, look at how you do that. So what happened to me as a child was I was looking in the mirror, and I was told by someone who loved me very much to not look in the mirror anymore. That was vain. And I have a sense that maybe that's what you were alluding to. At first, it's like, why are they looking at themselves so much? It's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like the supervisor of, you know, the ABA would say, oh, we have to cover the mirror. It's not appropriate. Really? You know, but that was their belief. And that's the general belief around, you know, the ABA.
Right. Right. Well, you know what? I think that's a parental thing too, because I've got these glass door mirrors in my bedroom, and, you know, we have issues at bedtime often with my kids, and they get crazy and they start looking at themselves in the mirror and they get real animated, and they're distracted to, you need to calm down, it's time for bed, you know, that kind of thing. And my husband's like, we need to cover these mirrors. He was saying the other night. So it's funny that you said that.
Time for everything, right?
Yeah, but you know,
I was gonna say, it's just so beautiful to really just see it and not judge it, because I think that's what we've been so trained to judge everything. And that's where we get caught up in ourselves and in others. And yeah, that uncomfortable feeling when someone cries, especially when you were told as a child, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about, which was my story. So yeah, you know, it's like to unlearn all of these and unravel all of that. It takes a lot of work to, you know, unwire things that your parents or your mom, you know, taught you, you know. So I love what you're doing with your kids, Amy, and you're giving them a new experience. And thank you for being one of those models and now sharing it with everyone. And one more thing I wanted to share, because I was like, oh, I have to just say something about the feelings, because autistics, they get so confused when, we say something and then, but our feelings are saying something else. So for instance, I have a past client who, when I used to work in ABA, and we're still talking, and her mom just died. This is the mom's mom just died. And then she says that her son is tantruming and he's regressing. And I said, well, can I ask you something? Has there been any changes in your family, either in your family or at school or something? And she goes, oh, and then she starts getting teary-eyed and emotional. She goes, oh, Lori, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. I was like, no, it's okay, you can get emotional. And then she goes, oh, my mom just died a couple of months ago. I said, at first I said sorry and my condolences, but then I said, you know, what you need to do is let Matthew know that, that's what you're feeling right now, because a lot of us hide that. It's like, I'm okay, but inside you're not okay, you're falling apart. So she took that and she did that. So that's a big thing. And a lot of the autistics will say that. They'll be like, why do you say one thing and you're feeling something else? It's so confusing for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I love that you use that example, because that is so what we do as adults. We think that our role as an adult or a parent, somebody who is a role model, or even doing it in front of another adult, is that it's not okay to get emotional, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to apologize for getting emotional. And I think it does. It comes with that experience of I'm making you feel uncomfortable because I feel what I feel, but that's not validating or giving yourself honor to feel what you're feeling in that moment. And especially, I mean, somebody's died in your life, you should absolutely be allowed to have grief and to feel sadness. We feel that feeling, that emotion passes through us when we watch a story. I mean, think about 9/11. How often every time the anniversary comes, or when it actually happened, there was the Heart Math Institute measured something like the electromagnetic heart rate of the earth, and compassion spiked on that day. All over the planet, they were able to measure that. And so the reality is these things are happening, they're very real, and it's okay, no matter what it is. It's when we throw it at each other, it's when we don't use them properly because we don't know how, is where, yeah, it may get judged as perhaps we could do that a different way. And I can definitely say that I'm not at all perfect. I still yell at my children sometimes. I have my experiences where I'm still learning and growing, but I try not to hang on to those moments too much, and I make them turning points as a goal. Okay, again, I'm not going to fall into that pattern and do that again. I'm not going to continue to relive the story that I grew up with. That's all we can do. And when you mentioned that story, that a very similar story was told to me several years ago. And in children in general, because I was a very sensitive child, I was empathic and didn't know it. And I realized the value in just being honest with your kids. And I remember being probably 5 or 6 years old and seeing my mom break down and cry uncontrollably. And I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on. But I also found in practicing with my kids, if I was just angry about something, I would just tell them, and I could see them relax and be okay. But what happens is like you said, they're feeling the energy of what it is, but they're seeing something else. So there's this like lack of resonance, this confusion that happens, right? I mean, that's exactly what you were saying. And I think that happens in a lot of us, but for them, they're so much more sensitive. They're so much more attuned, and the relationship between parent and child is really pronounced when you have a child that has particular needs. You tend to, especially when those incidents happen and you're noticing behaviors, those are the triggers for us. Instead of sometimes us seeing that as information, we tend to look at it all about this healing journey for our children. But, hence I think he's regressing. Well, maybe there's just the energy of the situation right now. What's going on? You know, so I think it's really great that you brought that awareness to her, because that's super important for us to just have awareness without judgment.
Oh, I mean, now I see him as such a great teacher. And for some reason, I worked with him for 3 years, which is a long time. And you know, there's always a reason when you're with someone for so long, you can say. And I know he is verbal, but very minimally verbal. Like he only says the words he feels. So typically 2 to 3 words, which I've really learned a lot from him, because it's like, why waste any energy when you don't have to? You know, and I know he's a pattern kid too. Like he loves like saying certain sounds over and over again. And it's not nonsense. To me, it's just like it's an energy. He's very energetic is really what I get. And he's definitely in the right family to teach him a lot. And there's a lot to relearn. But the mom is pretty open as far as trying new things. She brought him to the dolphin therapy years ago, and that's when he started talking. So you could see she's got, you know, she's open-minded enough to try different modalities that are outside of the typical mainstream. Well, I'm gonna have to give them a little call and see how they're doing.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I think it's really special that you're bringing in these personal experiences, because I'm sure you see that a lot. For me, it's a little more of an assumption that each and every one of us come into the family that we're meant to be in. But I bet you see that on a much more explainable level from the personal, intimate experiences that you get to have with these people, different families.
Yeah, I'm so honored to have these experiences, and I'm so grateful that I'm open enough to be able to recognize that they are who they are and that they're not damaged or disordered. Although that it is physically challenging to live on Earth, but at the same time, I recognize their expansiveness, their awareness, and every now and then, especially now, if somebody says something in their energy will, for instance, I went to see Amma with Nicole and her family, and as Nicole and her family were going up to get the hug from Amma, there was a woman who I was sitting next to, and she said, "Oh, that girl, she's disabled." She could tell that I was friends with the family. And I said, well, she's autistic. I said, and I could hear her vibration was kind of like in pity. So I turned it around and I said, you know, physically it is challenging. I said, but consciously, she's so expansive. And that for me, it was like an energy, you know, like just shifted that energy. And it was great because Nicole and her family were done. So it was like perfect time for me to get up and really just shift that energy of like, no, we're not going to go into the pity energy. It's like, she's great, you know, but yeah, it's challenging. I'm not gonna lie. Yes, it's challenging. Yet the expansiveness that she has, if only you knew, you'd be like, woo, she is something spectacular. So just had to share.
That's wonderful. You touched on some great points that are perfectly in sync with some of my highlights that I made. There was a couple of points. Let's see. There's something that you said that was exactly what Gail said. And I want to share that with the group today, those that didn't get the email, because I quoted it in the email. Any of you who are watching this and are not on the list to receive email updates, I don't spam you. I don't send you a lot. I send you updates and recordings about the book club specifically. And sometimes within those reminders, I will kind of throw in some tidbits of the moment or things that were shared within the group that I feel are relevant. And of course, my computer runs slow every time when I'm doing these. So I'll pull that up in a minute, but it was a quote that Gail said. Do you remember what it is? Because it was, I think it was an image that you had posted for the Gifts of Autism about.
Yeah. You know what? That quote was actually, I posted it. Gail gave it to me because I asked a bunch of parents and educators if they've seen their take on the Gifts of Autism, you know, so I could put it in my book that's coming out. in divine timing, but it's definitely on its way. So basically, for some synchronistic reason, I just looked at it and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to share that. And that was just on Friday, I believe, that I shared it. And then you saw Jose shared it, which was great. And it
Yeah.
was basically, I mean, I can't remember verbatim, but basically, the gifts in autism is not really gifts at all.
Yep. They are.
It's
I
something
have it here.
it's something that we all have, but
They
not
are.
everyone is open enough to love them in.
Yes. Yeah, they are natural abilities that everyone holds, but few are open enough to love them in. And that was exactly the words that you used about being open enough. I think that that's a huge key to us being vulnerable. You know, if we're open, then we're receiving, and we're not too proud to, you know, not receive. Essentially, it's that kind of give and take, that give and receive piece. Um, and of course I lost a little bit about what we were talking about before, but I think that in that moment with that woman that you had where she brought up her perspective or whatever that was in that segment, it gave both of you, you gave the both of you the opportunity to choose something different in that moment. And I bet you made a huge effect on her in helping her see that, you know, there's a different choice every time. I mean, we find that in our lives. You know, we're running these programs constantly of negativity, and I've had my fair share for sure. I think we all have. It's just in us, and it doesn't make us wrong or bad. It's just like coats that we've put on. You know, we've talked about that in this series several times about these layers and these identities that we put on. And their rules and regulations, you know, about just being who we are. And it really, they don't serve us. They don't serve that broader humanity that recognizes the spark inside of us, that divine spark.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to touch a little bit on that healing aspect, because you talked about taking the dolphin therapy. And throughout this, the first part of the book, Gail talked a lot about some of the different therapies that really did help Lyrica. And I really appreciated how she took her moments to recognize when they weren't working anymore, and then they stopped doing them. And there is this kind of fine line that happens with our children, is we start, and we do this with ourselves too. You know, we think that we need fixing. We think something's broken. And to shift from that perspective of nothing is broken is a really tough one. However, what I realized in this chapter is that there is healing that's needed and wanted by all of us. And Lyrica shares in this part. It's right after she says, time to honor souls in autism as planetary healers. So where are the scars in autism that need to be healed? They are the scars in society wanting healing. Recovery is our mutual quest. We are not separate from the mainstream when the mainstream sees the point of life. That God is the driving force that joins the rest of life forces that are seeking God's ways. So I look at when she discusses, as you know, God's ways, that's just the natural ways of being and connecting. And, you know, God is our source, not necessarily this entity in the sky that's controlling us. And I know that that's a point of view that Lyrica comes from. And I love that she uses that word, because people tread lightly using that word God. But when she talks about God ways, it is about being that one, that connectedness. And I really appreciate how in here she says, and I even wrote, healing is different than fixing. Fixing is kind of more a perspective of fitting in. So I looked at it as more like maybe like a third dimensional way of looking at it, is we're fixing. But if we take a moment to recognize that we all deserve a little healing, we all deserve a little nurturing, to get us to that place that we all really do truly in our hearts want to go and be, then the scars of society do get healed. And how do we do that? Wouldn't you agree, Lori? I mean, I feel like we heal the world when we heal ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually also jotted that paragraph down as well. So there must be a reason for that. But I love when she wrote that that it's society's healing that we're really looking at. It's not really about, you know, because healing, you know, there's the word healing and curing is completely different, right? Because people get so confused. You know, if you talk about curing autism, to me, you're right. Like I'm constantly trying to heal the parts of me that need to be whole. Maybe that's more like it. But I like that they reflect to us what we need to heal as a society. That's what I see. So like the vaccinations, they're showing us it's too toxic, you know. With the water is too toxic, you know, all of these things that are not really suitable for them, because they're so sensitive, their nature and their body and their crystalline body is like they're the first one to reflect back of what is toxic in our society. So that's the way I see it. And yeah, there's always room for us to heal parts of us. And that's a good thing, because like you just said, when we heal ourselves, we're healing all of humanity. So
Yeah, because we are a part of that. You know, we're not separate from that, and we're a very important part of humanity. You know, all of us matter. And that's why that self-love is such an important element to integrate into our lives. And she even says here, the first step is the returning of the autism template into its natural state. The template of origin is the state of oneness, very separate from this world's reality. Starting point is to get back to that beginning. Have to stay there to be ready for safe cancellation of our state of isolation that we hold in this world. Yeah, that I think really does say a lot in regards to that. I mean, just the origin is the state of oneness, to make it really simple, because all of this is such deep information. You have to allow the words to pass through you and not try to overthink it too much or connect it to the reference points that we have in our rational mind. But ultimately, I really believe that's what she's saying there is about us kind of getting back to that original template. And just like you said, in them showing us what they're sensitive to, the toxicity and stuff, it's kind of like we are as well, but we've been persisting throughout it. You know, it's interesting how we do have these moments where we have things within ourselves that need healing. And I think that the more that we can tune into ourselves and be true to what's really being shown to us, we know what our children need as well. We're very in tune to our children. And even if it's not our child, it could be like someone that you're giving, you know, therapy or counseling to. You're connected in relationship with that person in that moment. And intuitively, you're going to know what they need, what you can offer them in that moment. And it could be that you know someone that did this dolphin therapy, and suddenly someone shows up in your next session or somewhere down the line in that week, and suddenly you're like, you know what, I know someone who did this, and you know, and that's how they hear about it. So we are constantly being communicated with by the higher realms in very subtle and simple ways that are in everyday communication. It's just a matter of, are we able to discern that that's, you know, what's coming to us from what direction? Because we are in that kind of age of information where we get overloaded with stuff. But I think that we know, you know, people get the God bumps, they get the chills, they get just that knowing, the aha moments that give them those epiphanies. Because we all have different levels of healing that we require, that are just going to make us more whole.
Yeah, and I wanted to share one more thing that I've been thinking about a few times since we've been talking, and that's just the power of nature and being outside and earthing, and even just being around the trees. And because I would remember another client of mine who just loved being outside and, you know, looking forward to like our walk, because that was part of the session, was actually going for a walk. And it's more than that. It's like not that they only need it, we all need it. We all need to be outside more. We all need the oxygen, and we need and I know that Lyrica wrote about that, how that's actually, it's a big gift for them to be out, or an energy uplift. I don't remember the words exactly she used, but how important it is. And I've just seen, you know, and it's not just them again, it's just like we all need to be out there. Again, they're just reflecting another thing that we really need to be aware of, and how to center ourselves and to support ourselves.
Yeah, nature deficit disorder is a very real thing. They even wrote a movie, that someone made a movie about it that I haven't seen. I've heard it's very good. I believe it's called Nature's Child or something like that. But absolutely, I mean, she goes, I'll let you guys look it up. It's on the end of chapter 10, where she talks about like water crystals in the body of the autistic. It's fascinating. I actually had questions about that, and I still do. I had several questions that came up I really wanted Daniel to share about, but I know that he was also under the weather during this last period, which is totally understandable. I mean, I went through a little bout of sickness as well. There's just been so much changing in us right now. So nurturing ourselves and answering that call and saying, okay, we need to postpone the book club or whatever it is, step away from the technology, get ourselves in bed and resting, or go outside and be with nature. I experienced the same thing. How many of us just, you know, crave that and love that? And we have really been removed from that. But we can do it very simply. Find a patch of grass or dirt and put your bare feet in it. There's a lot from that website, earthing.com, that talks about the free electrons that come from the earth that are really good for the human body. And it's important to be barefoot because of all of the shoes that we wear, and even the cement and the asphalt and certain, I think cement's okay. I'm not totally sure as far as that being a conduit. But there's a lot of evidence and situations that have been shown, and that people have had really pronounced healing by just touching the earth for a good period of time. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, you're welcome. I think it's so important, and I knew Lyrica wrote about that, and I've just seen it so many times. So again, it's a reflection for all of us that we need to get out there. And I know whenever I'm feeling a little bit, especially lately, with last few months, it's been rough, but I've just been like, I need to go out and just walk barefoot in the grass.
It's a good time to do it here at this time of year too, because we haven't quite started to get the snow yet.
Well, I don't think we'll get it here, but you will.
Yeah. Or for the weather to be, you know, too cold to be walking around barefoot.
I hear you.
Yeah, Lori's in LA, so.
And we have rain today. The rain gods are blessing us today, so thank you, God. It's a beautiful day here.
Yeah, we had some rain last night, so we must be sharing a little bit. I know. Yeah. Yep. Us east of you, we got a lot of your weather and all of that good stuff coming this way. I really appreciate how you keep bringing up about these individuals being teachers, because that's kind of part of the theme that goes through these couple chapters. So I think it's really purposeful that you were joining me today to share about this. She even says, we are here to be fifth dimensional soul teachers for others. We have new ways to bring in light to the planet. And I had a question at one point, you know, do they teach when people are not even aware? And of course the answer was yes, is what I received. And coincidentally, when I first read, I shouldn't say first, when I read that for the show a couple weeks ago, because I was prepared before we had to cancel, and there was an incident that a friend of mine told me about where she had experienced, she called him a very severe autistic child, and it was in a store, and he was banging the cart on stuff and screaming and yelling, and you know, she was talking about how she and the cashier were all traumatized by this young man. And the mother was
Mm-hmm.
explaining how he just had gotten a haircut, which that's a very fascinating thing to me because a while ago I read an article about how our like our can be in our hair, and a lot of the Native Americans that went into the military that had their hair cut off actually lost their sixth sense because they used to be able to detect when someone was sneaking up on them and stuff. And I thought that was really interesting. And then one of my fellow mother Autism practitioners said that her son used to tell her that when she was cutting his hair that she was cutting his neurons. And so here to me, I'm like, this boy's been compromised and he's having his experience. And at the same time, I kind of thought to myself, wow, I bet you in that situation, especially because I just read this, it's like he was teaching my friend, the cashier, I'm sure his mother, he was teaching at a time when those people were not aware that he was teaching them. And I think that the important part is what you said about being open. You know, if we can be open to life as a gift, no matter what it is that we're experiencing, instead of judging someone as, oh, you're compromised, you're throwing a tantrum, you know, that kind of stuff, we're just seeing the surface. What amazing things can we learn from every situation in our life that we just discount as, oh, that just is what it was. You know, there's a little bit in there for everybody. And I think energetically he was doing something for them. For sure.
I want to do something because this is what I used to do when I used to work in the community with the families. You know, we'd go out there for Target or whatever it was. It could be the restaurant, and I would tell the parent before anything happened. You know, if anything were to happen, I call it autism awareness. That's literally what I would call it. And I'd say, well, you know, if your child acts out, you know, we'll just call it autism awareness, which means that anyone that's in that vicinity is here to teach, is here to learn, to be students. So it kind of took the pressure off of just feeling that pressure of like, oh my God, what if my child has a tantrum or acts out or meltdown? Is like, and also what we're doing for the child is to also let go of the fear, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen, but we don't know if it's going to be through us or it's going to be through community or whatever. So it's kind of like giving ourselves permission to just hold that space for the child. And, you know, still, as soon as something would happen, I'd say, okay, autism awareness. And that would be, and I could say right away that the charge wasn't as strong as it could have been, just because they had the awareness. Now, you know, the cashier or whatever, they had awareness, but at least the parent did. So the parent would actually also hold that space for the child.
Yeah.
That was big.
I appreciate that because for quite a while, I wasn't aware of what these particular groups that my awareness. And so I love that you've pretty much redirected that essential label of autism awareness, because there was a point at which I started to realize that some of these groups weren't really liked by people with autism, that were, you know, having special days and fundraisers and all that kind of stuff for autism awareness. And so I love how you redirected that, because that's what I feel like autism awareness is being aware and holding that space. That's a really beautiful way to define that. Because my whole thing was autism awareness of what autism really is. And how do we do that? You know, like, but that's a very tangible, everyday use of that. I really like that you're directing people to just hold that space. You know, it's really honoring any human to do that, to allow them that space, to allow them their moments.
Yeah, and allow them to feel what they're feeling, the parents, you know, because it's, you know, it's still the stigma. Oh my goodness, what are people thinking about me as a parent? You know, and it's just like, just to hold that space and say, you know, I know you're probably feeling a little overwhelmed, but that's okay, because, you know, whatever they need to learn, they're going to get it too. I mean, we're just being facilitators. You know, your child is being a facilitator for what needs to be.
Yeah, I try to enact that in my life, just to be facilitators for other people.
It works.
That's really cool.
Sometimes I need to be reminded too. We all do.
Yeah, we do. I think that it's a process, you know. It's not something that we get beautifully and then it stays all the time, you know, because we have our patterns, we have our habits that we fall back into, and ones that we don't even like. But I think the more that we just keep being aware about when they rise up, then it gives us an opportunity to start diving into our tools that we have. Those of us that are in any kind of tools, we have tools to clear those energies, to clear things out that aren't serving us anymore. So, you know, it's a good reminder to step into our power and utilize those. There's this part I wanted to read from chapter 11, and this would be a good kind of piece that we can kind of wrap things up. And it really does kind of encase a lot of everything that we were talking about. She says, we lose our hearts often and find ourselves locked in here. That's why we need spiritual support to gift us our legacy. That is our diet needed more than foods or behavior therapies. We have all we need to serve except respect and soul support in this world. So they have all that they need to serve, but they don't have respect and they don't have soul support. So that's what we're here to do when we hold that space, right? We are here now to teach these truths, to light the way for autism to seek its avenue in the great shift taking place. We have to be seen as teachers, not broken humans needing to be fixed. Then we will be treated as the holy ones that we are. Honoring autism is the highest service mind there is. Seeding the autism spark will help the planet greatly. And I love that so much. I really,
Me too.
I liked how that was the other piece that I wanted to touch on too, that you had mentioned earlier about how Connie said the same thing about Daniel. And, you know, you were talking about Nicole and how they don't really want to talk about things that aren't important. And that, especially those that are nonverbal, you know, it really says something about how much we abuse or abuse our ability to speak. And language really does kind of dilute a lot of what's going on. I think that's why often they'll say, meet us in the space in between, because there's a lot going on energetically, downloading, you know, things that are really changing us at a molecular DNA level into that higher consciousness so that we can be where they are too. So yes, they are teachers. And just like any of us who are teachers and recognize that we learn just as much from those we're teaching, it's a really beautiful exchange. And it's definitely a newer paradigm of teaching and learning, and parenting and caregiving. And so I know for me that this has really just reiterated why I love to share about the higher awareness and spirituality that autism brings us. Because the rest of it to me just limits us. Right? Is there anything you want to share as we
definitely. I think of Nicole again. These two parts you were just talking about, which is respect. I've seen it with quite a few families now, not many families, but the ones that I do see where that shift occurs, where the parent now recognizes that child as a wisdom holder, as a teacher, their life transforms. You know, now all of a sudden the parent is now asking the child, like, you know, what all the higher questions and what we should be doing and everything, which is a beautiful thing. And that's the respect. And really, like, you can't go backwards once you see their true nature of who they are. It's like you really can't go backwards. Like the time when we had dinner with Aunt Sedona, when we met, and we sat with Lyrica, and she sat there for an hour and a half with us, and she was really calm. And even Gail was like so surprised that Lyrica was able to sustain for that long. And then eventually Gail asked Lyrica, like, what's going on? You know, what's she thinking? And then she said it was like being in the womb. I can't remember the words, but it was really touching and beautiful. And basically that we were all holding a space, holy space, I feel like she said. And that transition is so important. And when that happens, it's like there's liberation in the family. You know, you can't see that autism as the way that the mainstream sees it anymore. Not to say that there are challenging days, of course, but I wanted to say something about Nicole that I had on my mind before I talked about our La Sedona experience. But yeah, basically that, yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a completely, oh, I know. Okay. So on the soul part of it, yeah, like we got the whole part with the respecting. And what is the soul part? Actually, Nicole actually told her mom that she needed a spiritual teacher. So they found a spiritual teacher because she needed to know more than what her parents could provide for her. And I thought that was really big. That was a big part. So like if you can't be that piece that holds that spiritual or that soul part, that you can ask someone outside of the family to hold that. And it's just amazing because the questions and things that she has shared with me, Nicole, is so profound and but so like there's no ego. To me, it's, I will say it, I see them as awakened beings, great awareness, expansive awareness, that they can see things that we can't see right now, but that we all have the capacity to see. But you know it when, you know, they've got no ego. Like she will never say anything that will hurt our feelings, you know, but she'll still be able to say things that are important for us to know. So I thought that was it. And you always leave feeling good because the way that she words it is just so honoring. So I just had to share that part.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a beautiful way to wrap up this little package of love that we have for these individuals. I know both you and I share that total appreciation. And I want to, I want to really recognize the both of us for allowing that in. Because I know that that's not easy. You know, we've done a tremendous amount of work to get there ourselves, to be open enough to love all that in.
Thank you. Yes.
And so, yeah, I think that I think what we can take away from today is recognizing how important it is to respect and to hold that space, and for us to really slow down to do that. You know, those of us that are running from place to place, it can be a big challenge to catch up with life. And I don't think that that's the natural way of being either. I think that being calm and, moving through the moments helps us to stay present in those moments and to make the right decisions that we can be happy with once they've passed, instead of regretting them. So thank you, Lori, so much for joining me today and playing with me in this energy. It was really lovely having you. Any of you out there? Say that again. I interrupted you.
It was more fun than I anticipated. You know, it's true. Like we have so much to say, and when we say it, it's like, I feel so good that. So thank you for inviting me today, and Gail and Lyrica and Connie and Daniel and all of the nonverbal autistics and everyone really holding the space for this to happen today. And me, I'm glad that I actually said yes to showing.
Take a little dose of her courage there, folks, and
woo, it feels good, baby.
Do the invitation and accept it and come and join us in our conversation. I want this conversation to keep going, even after we're finished with the book club. But throughout can really help, because we have epiphanies, and sometimes if we don't write those down or connect with somebody about it, it gets missed. And I think that connection and sharing that with each other is really important. And for those of you who now have had a taste of the gifts of autism, with Lori presenting and sharing some of that and aren't aware of it, there is an ever-growing, huge Facebook group that she has, The Gifts of Autism. So I encourage you to join that. It's a wonderful support system and ways of sharing the gifts specifically, and also receiving support from others in that way. And she also has, if you want to contact her, thegiftsofautism.com is her website. And I'll put all that information, links down below in the description of this video. And thank you for joining us. And we will see you in a couple of weeks on September 29th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And Connie should be back on with us to go over chapters 12 and 13 of the Autism book. Thank you, everybody. Namaste. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Bye.